Hello students, I welcome you all in this video lesson with a very big heart. In this video lesson, I'm going to talk about biogeochemical cycles. So let's get started. The natural cycles or pathways in which essential matter, nutrients and other elements is circulated through the biotic and abiotic parts of the biosphere are called biogeochemical cycles. The term biogeochemical is derived from bio meaning biosphere, geo meaning geological components, and chemical meaning the elements that moves through a cycle. Since matter can neither be created nor be destroyed, it is recycled in the Earth's system in various forms. Types of biogeochemical cycle. Basically, biogeochemical cycles can be divided into the following two types: gaseous cycles, such as water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, etc., sedimentary cycles, such as rock cycle, etc. Important biogeochemical cycles, which we are going to read, are water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, and oxygen cycle. Let's start with water cycle. Water cycle or hydrological cycle is the circulation of water between atmosphere, land, and water bodies on the earth. Stages of water cycle: evaporation and transpiration. Water from water bodies like oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. gets evaporated due to sun's heat and rises up. Water vapor also gets released from plant's body through transpiration process. Next is sublimation. On mountain peaks, due to low pressure, snow sublimate into water vapor with utilization of less energy. On Earth, primary source of sublimation is from the ice sheets covering the poles of the Earth. Condensation. Water vapor released from various sources rises up in the atmosphere and eventually cools down due to low temperature at high altitudes. Water vapor then turns into tiny droplets of water forming clouds. Next is precipitation. In this process, enough water droplets combine together and fall down as rain. Sometimes, due to cold weather or extremely low air pressure, water droplets freeze and fall down as snow or hail. Infiltration. The water that falls down as rain on land runs into rivers and finally reaches the oceans. Some of the rainwater seeps into the soil and becomes part of underground reservoir of fresh water. This is how water cycle gets completed. Next one is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle is the process through which nitrogen is converted into many forms, passing from the atmosphere to the soil to the organism and finally back into the atmosphere. Nitrogen is an essential constituent of proteins, nucleic acids like DNA and RNA, vitamins, and chlorophyll. Plants and animals cannot utilize atmospheric nitrogen readily. This is the nitrogen cycle. Let's see various steps involved in nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle involves the circulation of nitrogen in the nature from its elemental form in the atmosphere into simple and organic molecules in soil and water and converting into complex organic molecules in living organisms and finally back to the elemental nitrogen in the atmosphere as we have discussed right now. The entire process of nitrogen cycle can be summarized into the following steps: nitrogen fixation, ammonification, nitrification, nitrogen assimilation, and denitrification. Let's see these one by one. Nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation involves the conversion of free atmospheric nitrogen gas into compounds of nitrogen by any one of the following ways. Atmospheric nitrogen fixation. It is a natural phenomenon where the energy of lightning breaks the nitrogen into nitrogen oxides, which then used up by plants. Biological nitrogen fixation. Free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria like Azotobacter and Clostridium, symbiotic bacteria, Rhizobium, blue-green algae like Anabaena and Nostoc, and non-leguminous plants, Ginkgo alnus, convert atmospheric nitrogen into usable form that can be absorbed by the roots of the plants. Please take care that the spelling should be Anabaena. N is missing after E. Industrial nitrogen fixation. It is a man-made process which aids nitrogen fixation by the use of ammonia. Ammonia is produced by the direct combination of nitrogen and hydrogen under high pressure and temperature, which is further converted into fertilizers such as urea. Second step is ammonification. When plants and animals die, the nitrogen present in the complex organic matter, protein, nucleic acid, gets converted into ammonia and released back into the soil. The decomposers, namely bacteria or fungus, present in the soil convert this organic matter back into ammonium. Nitrification. In this process, ammonia is converted into nitrates with the help of bacteria present in the soil. It occurs in two steps. Bacteria such as Nitrosomonas, Nitrosococcus, etc. convert ammonia to nitrates, and then bacteria such as Nitrobacter, Nitrococcus, etc. convert nitrites to nitrates. Next is the nitrogen assimilation. Plants absorb nitrates from the soil and convert them into organic compounds, that is plant proteins. In this way, it enters the food web when primary consumers eat them. This process of conversion of inorganic nitrates into organic compounds by plants is called nitrogen assimilation. Last one is the denitrification in nitrogen cycle. The unused nitrates obtained from nitrogen fixation get converted to nitrogen gas, which is released back into the atmosphere with the help of denitrifying bacteria such as Clostridium and Pseudomonas. This process of conversion of nitrates to nitrogen gas is called denitrification. Another cycle is the carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is circulation of carbon through different forms between abiotic components and biotic components of the biosphere. Carbon in elemental form is found as diamond and graphite, whereas in combined form as carbon dioxide in air. Carbonate and hydrogen carbonate salts in various minerals, organic molecules such as carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc. in living beings. This diagram shows the carbon cycle in nature. The two steps involved in carbon cycle basically are utilization of carbon and release of carbon back in the atmosphere. Utilization of carbon. Carbon as carbon dioxide is taken by green plants from the atmosphere during the process of photosynthesis. It is then converted into carbohydrates, which is used by both plants and animals. When these plants and animals die and get buried deep into soil and water, they change into fossil fuels such as coal and petroleum, and the carbon dioxide forms inorganic carbonates such as limestone and carbonate rocks. It should not be carbonatra, it should be carbonates. Release of carbon back in the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide, which is fixed in green plants as glucose, is converted back into carbon dioxide during respiration by plants and animals and is released back into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is also added to atmosphere through decomposition of dead matter of plants and animals by microorganisms, burning of fossil fuels, weathering of carbonate rocks, acid rain, volcanic eruptions, and of course, hot springs. Marine animals convert carbon to calcium carbonate, and this forms the building materials required to create hard shells. When organisms with calcium carbonate shells die, their bodies decompose, leaving behind their hard shells, which accumulate on the seafloor and are eventually broken down by the waves and compacted under enormous pressure, forming limestone. When these limestone rocks are exposed to air, they get weathered and carbon is released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Last one is the oxygen cycle. The oxygen cycle is the biological process which helps in maintaining the oxygen level in the atmosphere. Oxygen cycle is interconnected with the carbon cycle. This diagram represents the oxygen cycle in nature. Let's see the steps involved in oxygen cycle. First one is the utilization of oxygen during respiration for oxidation of glucose to release energy. Combustion of fuels like wood, coal, petroleum, natural gas, etc. Decay and decomposition of organic matter by aerobic microbes also utilize oxygen. Fixation of atmospheric oxygen at the time of lightning with atmospheric nitrogen to produce oxides of nitrogen. Next step is towards the replenishment of oxygen. It occurs by releasing of oxygen back into the atmosphere during the process of photosynthesis by autotrophs. Thank you very much for being with me in this lesson. Have a great day ahead. Goodbye.